Hello, you are listening to History Lessons with me, Caroline Stadler.
And Dominique Meeks.
And Alan Haddad.
And Trishala Dawes.
Today, we will talk about the wonders of Russia from 1450 to 1750.
How exciting!
So let's get started.
Well, modern-day Russia is located in northern Eurasia, Eastern Europe and northern Asia, to be exact. It is the largest country known in size.
Wow, you're kidding.
Nope. In fact, Russia has always been a large country, with the Arctic Circle in the north, Ural Mountains to the west, Sayan Mountains to the south, and the Pacific Ocean to the east. Although, in 1450, it was an isolated empire that had no warm water ports at the time and barely any connection with the advancements in Western Europe.
The capital at the time was Moscow, which was rebuilt by the Tatars, who granted them trade and protection to grow and was under Prince Ivan III. It was also the bureaucratic center of the Russian Orthodox Church and government.
The Russian Orthodox Church had just broken off of Constantinople at the time and became the metropolitan of Moscow.
So it was still under the control of the Mongols as a tributary state then?
Indeed it was. When Russia was under the rule of the Mongols, they were not included in the Golden Horde and were forced to pay tribute. The Tatars formed a part of the Golden Horde armies that invaded the Russian Empire in the 13th century. But Russia started to break free of Mongol control between 1450 and 1480 and started its process toward political centralization and territorial expansion.
That's when Ivan III, or Ivan the Great, became the first Russian leader by marrying into the Byzantine Empire and proclaiming Moscow as the Third Rome.
The first Rome being Rome itself, and the second being Constantinople of the Byzantine Empire.
Actually, he was a prince of Moscow, still under the tributary state, but expanded the Russian territory. Ivan the Great broke free from the Tatars by tearing up their treaty they wrote for tribute and declared Russia his own empire. He formed the independence of Russia, expanding the empire 15,000 to 14,000 square miles. He created a strong navy, reorganized his army according to Western standards, schools, and began new administrative and territorial divisions throughout the country. Ivan the Great ruled from 1462 to 1505.
His son, Ivan IV, or Ivan the Terrible, became the first Tsar while imposing an absolute monarchy and ruled from 1533 to 1584.
Why was he called the Terrible? He couldn't have been that bad.
Well, he did brutally kill his own son in a fit of rage, but he was also seen as a powerful ruler that defeated the Kazan Khanate and finally broke free of Mongol rule in 1547. When the Golden Horde was dissolved, new states like the Kazan Khanate were formed by Tatars, which later Russia conquered and included in the empire. In fear of the Russian aristocrats, the boyars would rise against him. He had many of them killed and others were sent into exile. He also made Russia an empire and built St. Basil's Cathedral.
Oh dear.
The one with the special onion domes?
You bet.
But wait, who were the boyars?
The boyars were the upper nobility in Russia and obtained the highest state offices in government, and as Moscow became the center of government and Tsars came to rule, their power slowly diminished. They lost the right to dethrone princes and to own land without consolidation of the Tsars. The class of boyars was officially abolished when Peter the Great came into power.
Peter the Great was the second Tsar, and while he sure did change Russia, he transformed the military, expanded the territory, reorganized the bureaucracy, relocated the capital, and built the infrastructure. Did you know that Peter the Great ruled Russia from 1682 to 1725 and decided on growing the empire towards Europe?
Really?
Yeah, and he wanted to westernize Russia and took many trips to Europe to study shipbuilding, government, and social customs. Since Russia did not have any warm water ports at the time, he expanded the territory and moved the capital towards St. Petersburg in the Baltic Sea to participate in European trade in 1712. He convinced Russia that the only way to become powerful was to be like Europe.
Also, when Peter traveled across Europe, he brought back new weapons and ship designs that could be used in the new Russian Navy, and he brought back Baroque architecture to build St. Petersburg's buildings and houses. These buildings and magnificent displays in the city called for new technologies and methods to build them, which Peter brought back from his trip as well. This can be seen in the myriad of blueprints of the fortress, city, ships, and the numerous calling for workers seen in these primary sources.
What great boat structure and map design.
And all of these letters, how interesting.
Peter the Great started the first westernization of Russia. He required the men to shave off their beards in order to rid themselves of Eastern traditions. The women were supposed to wear Western fashions from Europe like multi-layered dresses. He attempted to bring in Western education in the empire. The upper class soon began to follow the Western cultures. The conditions for upper class women improved because the Western social requirements were less restrictive than the Eastern social requirements.
Did you also know that Peter abolished the patriarch of the Orthodox Church and placed religious affairs under government supervision and control? He did this as another act of westernization.
Interesting. Did you know that Peter the Great put into place systemized codes allowing for taxation? A tax system was developed in order to pay for the urban planning projects, military reform, and expansion of territories. The tax system used was a direct taxation on households by grouping houses together and considering the demands as one house, and Peter put a tax on all males except for the clergy and nobility. He established metallurgy and mining industries, which continued to expand to provide materials for the urban planning projects, as well as creating an economy based on extracting natural resources.
Peter the Great also helped change the spectrum of education by moving from secular teaching, like about the Navy and military, to incorporating Western education like mathematics and science.
He sure did, but let's not forget Catherine the Great, who further strengthened Russia after Peter transformed it. She expanded the territory 200,000 square miles, used new wealth to modernize Russia, built 216 towns, and ruled from 1762 to 1796.
Fascinating. She built a lot of new cities, so she probably called for new ways to build them as well.
You're right. And she also built a canal system to improve trade and supported Enlightenment ideas in science and technology.
We can't forget that she completed St. Petersburg after the death of Peter the Great and built the magnificent Winter Palace. The Winter Palace was originally built for Peter the Great's daughter, Empress Elizabeth, and to house the Russian Tsars. Sadly, Empress Elizabeth died before the palace was completed, so Catherine finished it and was able to live there.
Oh, wow, of course not.
Russia was a land-based empire under the rulings of czars like Ivan VI the Terrible, Peter the Great, and Catherine the Great after all. Its dependence of the land was because of its dwindling literacy rates, which led it to becoming agriculturally based on serfdom. Serfdom was not originally part of the caste system of the Russian Empire. It was a result of the Tatars' invasion in the 1200s, which led to the peasants becoming homeless and moving onto the lands of wealthy Russian citizens. By the 16th century, peasants came under the absolute control of the landowner, and by mid-1600s, serfdom was hereditary. Serfs were laborers who were legally bound to the landowners and his estates and compelled to perform certain tasks for lords. The Russian social hierarchy, as follows, was Tsars, nobility, merchant class, and then serfs. The merchant class had little to no value at all because of local consumption, and the trade was handled by outside sources like the Westerners, and his reforms that provided sufficient revenue for his expanding empire.
The rise of the Russian Empire was different from the rising of its Western counterparts because of its limited commercial exchange. The restricted commercial exchange was caused by the lack of access to warm water ports, causing the Russian Empire not to be able to participate in the maritime revolution. The Russian Empire did not require commercial exchange because the Mongols' rule caused international trade to go down and local trade to go up, and limited manufacturing. Also, its rise was caused by the aggressive expansion after it overthrew the Mongols.
Russia was also a gunpowder empire. The gunpowder revolution affected Russia by introducing new firearms and making the army a permanent professional force trained in using these firearms and artillery. The economy funded the military forces because the military drove the empire expansion.
Well, I believe that's all the time we have for Russia from 1450 to 1750.
Oh wow, already?
That's all, folks.